He committed suicide at the age of 34. After he passed away, I was all that my mom had. I had to be the man of the house at the age of 11 years old. I would mow lawns and do any odd jobs I could to help my mom with the bills. She was already working 3 jobs to support us both. Somehow, we both made it through. It was definitely very difficult, but it got a lot easier once I could actually get a job. All of our bills were paid and there was food on the table. I wish I could say that this happy little story had a happy ending, but it doesn't. About a month ago, I just got off of work and my mom was sitting at the dining room table. There was a man sitting down in a suit and tie. My mom asked me to sit down. "How are you doing, Miles? My name is Landon Lebowski. I was your dad's attorney." My heart sank to the ground and I looked over at my mom. She already had like 15 used tissues on the table, so I sit down next to my mom to comfort her. "How can I help you, Mr. Lebowski?" I said with a trembling voice. "Well, I was talking to your mother and I have some good news and bad news. The bad news is, they're gonna demolish your childhood home. The good news is, the bank is trying to sell the home at a really good price. It's been abandoned since the dreaded day." He looks down at the table and coughs with a look of remorse. "They need someone to buy it or they're gonna destroy it. No one wants to buy it because of the history. I look over at my mom and she's still crying. "Look, Mr. Lebowski, I'm pretty sure that this is obvious, but there's nothing but pain, anger, and sadness in that house. I think we're gonna pass." I could see the disappointment on his face as soon as I said that. "Well, your dad left the house in your name, Miles, so if you want nothing to do with it, it will be destroyed. I just need you to sign right here." He slides the piece of paper across the table with a pen. I grab the pen and start looking over the documents and I was about to sign it when my mom grabbed my wrist. I've always trusted my mom 100%, so when she grabbed my wrist, I honestly was scared that she lost her mind. I knew right away that she wasn't ready to let go of the past. I looked over at her and I saw in her eyes the look I haven't seen since my dad died. I put the pen down and said, "We will go look at the house." 24 hours later, I was in the house. It was empty, definitely a lot smaller than I remembered. I looked behind me and my mom was standing at the doorway. I walked over to her. "Mom, we don't have to do this if you don't want to." She was just lost and speechless. She took that first step and it was almost like it was too much for her. The look on her face was something no one should ever have to see on their mother. I grabbed her hand and took her back outside so she could get a fresh breath of air. "Mom, if you're not ready for this, we can leave the past where it should be left, behind us." I looked behind me at my childhood home and back at my mom. She looked at me and she said something that will live with me the rest of my life. "Neither one of us need to heal from this trauma. Your dad needs to know that even though he left us, we are still here for him." I don't know why, but that hit me hard in the heart. I grabbed my mom's hand and I said, "Let's walk in together this time." She smiled at me and I knew that she was ready. We walked into the house holding each other's hands. We started looking all around and the memories just slapped me in the face. Everything was coming back all at once. My mom was looking around until she got to the stairs. "Mom, if you want to wait, we can if you want. You don't need to take this giant of a leap already," I said with pure concern on my face. She looked over at me and back at the stairs and she took the first step. My mom is 5 feet 1 inch and 100 pounds. She's a tiny woman but honestly strong as hell. We both went upstairs and we went to my old room. It was really dusty and had a bunch of cobwebs in there. My mom walked in behind me and smiled with all of the memories coming out at once. Honestly, all of the memories hit me as well, like the time I was jumping on the bed and I hit my head on the ceiling fan and had to get stitches. I still have the scar on my head. "Why don't we clean up the place and tomorrow we stay the night?" My mom said as I was looking around and I turned around quickly looking at her like I didn't just hear what I heard. "Mom, are you serious?" She shrugged and kept looking around. "Mom, this place is dirty and probably has mold. I have cobwebs shooting out of my ears." What really scared me is that I think she already made up her mind at that very second. She was actually thinking about living here. "Alright, well, don't just sit there, let's start cleaning and get to work." I smiled at her and I can actually see the excitement on her face. After 24 hours, we pretty much got the place completely cleaned. We had an inspector come out to check everywhere for mold. Luckily, there wasn't any, so it was time to spend the night in my childhood home. We brought an air mattress for the both of us and set it up in my old room. Before anyone asks, no, we haven't gone into the same room that my dad committed suicide, which was my parents' old room. So we brought some pillows and blankets and laid down. I kissed my mom on the forehead and told her goodnight like we do every night. It was around 1 a.m. when I first woke up. The shoes were in my face. At first I thought it was a spider. I grabbed my phone to use the flashlight and I screamed like a little girl. My mom jumped awake and I took my eyes off of him for 2 seconds and then he was gone. The pure horror on my face as I'm just looking up the ceiling, unable to get the words out. My mom got up and turned on the light. I was shaking, like really shaking. Let's just say neither one of us didn't get any sleep that night. The next morning while I was asleep, my mom went into town and got some groceries. I woke up the smell of her famous bacon. Okay, it's not actually famous, but it's really good. I got up and went downstairs and kissed my mom on the cheek. "Good morning, sweetheart, you want some breakfast?" she said with her usual smile. Even if all of the stress we've had since that day, she always can find a way to keep a smile on her face. It honestly keeps a smile on my face as well. Definitely, it smells great like always. I grabbed a paper plate since we have no actual dishes here and we sat down and ate breakfast. My mom kept looking over at me until finally I looked at her. I chuckled and said, "What? Would you like to tell me what happened last night?" I looked at her and the image of his shoes right in front of my face just hit my memory again. "It was nothing, just a bad dream," I said. She gave me a weird look and shrugged it off. After breakfast I had to go to work and my mom decided to take the day off to clean the house. She still stayed away from that room. Later that night I returned home and yelled out for my mom. I went into the living room and I saw her sitting in one of the chairs we brought over. I went over to her and noticed she was sleeping. I smiled and went over to a box with some blankets and grabbed one. I put it over her and continued to clean. I didn't think we were ever gonna get it cleaned, but we eventually did. About 30 minutes later I was listening to music and just like the horror movies, my mom touched my shoulder. I basically jumped out of my skin. "Holy shit, Mom, you scared me." She just laughed like everything was normal. I'll be honest, at this moment I was still startled from the night prior but didn't let my mom know. She was cooking supper and I was in the living room setting up the TV we brought over from our old apartment. As I was setting it up, I heard my mom scream, "MOM." I yelled as I ran into the kitchen and she turned around. "What, honey?" she said as she didn't just scream. "Did you just scream?" I asked her in a concerned manner. She looked at me like I was nuts. "No, I didn't scream." I took a deep breath and shook my head. "It's nothing, Mom, don't worry about it," I said. I walked back into the living room to hook up the TV and it was turned on. Hey Mom, did you turn on the TV by chance?" She yelled back, "No, I haven't touched it, why?" "Nothing, Mom, I'm just gonna go to bed, it's been a long day." I started to walk upstairs and I got hit in the head. What the food dash? I looked up and wanted to vomit. MOM. I've never screamed so loud in my entire life. I ran downstairs into the kitchen, "Call the cops." The cops showed up and searched the entire house with no sign of anyone being in there besides us. I apologized for wasting their time. "Look, Miles, we have an old family friend who is a therapist, he can get you the help you need." I looked at my mom. "What family friend?" She looked at me. "It was one of your dad's friends, he's been a friend of your father's for over 30 years and he can get you some yep." I took a deep breath. "Okay, I'll give it a shot. What's his name?" She wrote down on a paper his name and his number. "His name is Dr. Morris." She also wrote down the address of his office. We decided to get some sleep after dinner. This time my mom was gonna sleep in the spare bedroom to give me some space. You would think I would be happy, but I wasn't. I was scared to death. "Okay, it's just my childhood room, I'm losing my mind, nothing is gonna happen." I slowly closed my eyes and tried to hurry up and sleep. I woke up several hours later and looked around. I then looked up. The next day I showed up to his office and walked in. Luckily, he had open appointments. I gave the receptionist my name and my information, and then she told me to take a seat and Dr. Morris will be with you shortly. I sat down and looked around the office and there were a bunch of pictures. I walked up to one of the pictures and my heart dropped. I looked over at the receptionist and back at the picture. I walked over to the receptionist and asked, "Excuse me, is that a picture of Dr. Morris?" She smiled and looks at the same picture and she nodded. Yes, it is. Actually, I think he's just about ready for you," she said. I walked over to the receptionist and asked, "Excuse me, is that a picture of Dr. Morris?" She smiled and looks at the same picture and she nodded. Yes, it is. Actually, I think he's just about ready for you," she said. "Well, Mr. Reed, I know we never have met before, but I'm so sorry about your father." He took a seat in a chair across from me. I cut straight to the point. Yeah, it was really sad, but the only problem is that I don't think he was my father now. He took a deep breath and looked at me. "Look, Mr. Reed, me and your mother and your father have been friends for a long time." I cut him off. "Did my mom cheat on my dad?" He looked at me and again took a deep breath. "Look, Miles, your father was a very important P-. Just tell me the truth, me and you look exactly alike, are you my F***king father?" I screamed at him. He looked down at the floor and back up at me. "Yes, I am your father, it's a long story, Miles." I started to get tears in my eyes and he could tell I was about to a mental breakdown. "Miles, it was a one-time thing, your mother and your father, well, James had a huge argument and it just happened. She came to me for advice and it was a mistake. You need to talk to your mother, Miles." I looked up at him, still seeing myself every time I see him. "Oh really, is that your professional advice?" I got up and walked out of the room and slammed the door behind me. I went straight to my mom's work and asked her to talk outside. "You F***king cheated on Dad?" She had the biggest look of shock on her face when I confronted her. "Oh, you have nothing to say?" A single tear dripped down her cheek and at that moment I knew that my entire life has been a lie. I didn't even want to hear what her excuse was. I left and drove back to my childhood home. This is one thing I did regret doing, but I started destroying everything in the house. I let all of the rage out of my system. Afterwards, I walked upstairs and laid down on my bed. The lights were off and I closed my eyes. I woke up again about 2 hours later and looked straight up. "Dad, you didn't commit suicide because of depression, you committed suicide because my mom, your wife, cheated on you. I'm not your blood, but you are my dad and you will always be my dad." He turned around, still with the rope around his neck, and looked down at me. "I love you, son." Each word being cut off because of the rope. I stood there watching my father until he finally vanished into thin air. "I love you too, Dad, I will always love you." It's been about 6 months since the last time I've seen my father. I moved out just a week after moving into my childhood home. Oh, and when I talk about my father, I mean the man who raised me, not the one who had the affair with my mother. I think my father finally found the peace he needed to move on. He will always be my father in my eyes. Dr. Morris eventually closed his business and apparently left the country. I haven't spoken to my mom since that day I confronted her. I think my dad wanted to tell me the truth and that's why he kept coming back. I wish I could see him just one more time, but I'm glad he's no longer in pain. Before anyone asks, I don't know if I will ever talk to my mother again. I need time to heal before I can give her a chance. She's been lying to me my entire life. Now looking back at old pictures of my dad, we look nothing alike. I should have known, and I blame myself for that mistake. But I do blame my mom for his suicide. If she was faithful, he would still be alive. This story is getting really long, so I'm gonna end it. All I have to say is, I love you, Dad. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, it really helps the channel grow. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future uploads.